And if you have trauma from your own childhood, or you have a very harsh, punitive superego, that's that internalized parent voice. And to come back to Freud, Freud said our ego, that's our sense of self, not ego as in narcissism. Ego has to mediate and make sense of and balance that internalized parent voice, i.e. superego, against our id, which is like impulse, wants, things that we just, impulsively think about or maybe want. And so our ego has to be strong to make sense of both of those. Welcome to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with Thomas Miller. Are you tired of your tweens, teens, and young adults' negative behaviors and poor choices holding you emotionally hostage, controlling your family, and ruling your life? If you answered yes, then you are in the right place. This podcast is a community for courageous parents just like you who come here to gain effective tools, skills, and take action so they can change their tween, teen, or young adult's life and improve their family's future. Welcome to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with your host, Thomas Miller. This is episode 29, by the way. I just want to say a huge thank you and shout out to anyone who has been on this journey with me, whether you joined 4 episodes ago, 2, 1, or 29 ago. I so appreciate you and thank you so much. And this is an incredibly heart-centered podcast. It's all about sending the elevator back down to parents who are managing the hardest freaking job in the world. And I hope you're getting a lot of value and joy out of it because it's all about giving you tactile, just very concrete tips and tools and strategies, right? I want you to be able to feel like you leave this podcast and you're like, all right, I got at least 2 golden nuggets, right? And 2 things I can do. So I just wanted to first and foremost shout that out and appreciate y'all. So today's topic is how to help your child overcome their inner critic. If you know, you know, right? If you have a child with an inner critic, you're probably dealing with it every single freaking day. I just started working with a new family that I'm coaching, and their child is, oh my God, has a meltdown the moment something does not go exactly their way. I was joking, saying that, they're so tight, they're going to poop a diamond, It's one of those. I have treated throughout the course of my 23-year career as a licensed clinical therapist, a bazillion kiddos that were perfectionists and had massive inner critics. I mean, massive. And it's such a negative thing for their self-esteem and their sense of character. I mean, it really can rob them of a sense of purpose, freedom, joy. It creates self-doubt. It will, oh my God, decrease their ability to try things, to be creative. I'm a soccer coach as well, and I'm always trying to encourage my kids to fail forward, the soccer players that I coach, right? To try stuff, to be a maverick, to be innovative. And you could just see the kiddos that have inner critics that, will only kind of play it safe and will only make the short, easy kind of thing, which, trust me, there's nothing wrong with keeping it simple and, building a repertoire. But you could just see other kids, that I coach or I've worked with as a therapist who have a sense of freedom and there's just a lightness to them, and they can, oh my God, they can dance in the rain, they can roll with the punches, they are unflappable, right? And that's what we want for kids, right? We want kids to be au naturel and free and to use their DNA. And if you believe in God, to be their God-given selves, whatever your value system is, just to let them, just be, able to just be loose, right? So we're going to talk a lot about how to help kiddos overcome and beat their inner critic, because these inner critics become internal voices that unfortunately will stay with them for life. I can't tell you how many CEOs or COOs or CFOs, a lot of C-suite employees that over the years I used to provide therapy to and I used to do executive coaching to, and they had massive inner critics, massive. And no matter what they did, they would always focus on, of course, their shortcoming or their mistake. And guess what? They were building a culture at their company that also was very focused on problems or mistakes or perfection. And it had a shunting effect on everyone's experience at that company. And globally, their performance eventually would be lower. So we don't want to bring, right, a perfectionistic inner critic to our family as well. So obviously, this is a podcast for parents. So we're going to start with us and we're going to look at what the hell are we modeling, right? So ask yourself this question, right? When you make a mistake, are you like, I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid. Oh my God, that's crazy, right? Bringing a flare of drama, right, to the mistake, bringing a flare of judgment and just attention and, stress. Or are you like, that was ridiculous, right? I just totally made a bonehead mistake, but it's all good, right? I'll get the next one. Are you extending grace to yourself, right? Are you flowing, again, space and freedom? Because guess what? Your kids are hanging on your every word. They're like hangers that hang on that rod in the closet, right? Your kids hang on your every word, choice, and behavior. And so we always have to start with us and think about what is the environment we're creating. Are we creating a really rigid, judgmental, harsh, punitive, binary culture? Culture wins championships, whether we're talking about, football or baseball or basketball, company culture, team culture, family culture, right? We want to gestate individuation. We want to gestate in innovation. We want to gestate, right? Failing forward, trying new things, being creative, thinking outside the box. That's what we want. We don't want to create or gestate. I'm using this gestate word a lot. We don't want to create a culture that only promotes, I'll say promotes, so we don't have to think about maybe pregnancy. We don't want to create a culture that only promotes perfection and high performance. And that's it, right? Because the failing, right? The process is what creates that amazing outcome. So let's make sure that we're building a culture in our household that's very process focused versus outcome focused. Because again, our kids are absorbing that, right? They're drinking that Kool-Aid and they're being saturated like a sponge that's saturated, right, in the water, which is the culture of our parenting. So if you got an inner critic, you got to work with you, right? You got to start with yours first. You got to take it down. And it might be, I could be a little Freudian for a hot second, right? Sigmund Freud. It might be your internal parenting voice. Freud said that we have an id, an ego, and a super ego. These are the parts of our personality in essence. And our super ego is our internalized parent voice. So if we come from a very harsh, very rigid, very judgmental, very, right, it's almost like smushing yourself through the eye of a needle, right? If we come from that culture, it's very, very understandable that we would have internalized that mom or dad voice, whoever that is, right? The no wire hangers. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, that's from Mommy Dearest. We don't want, it's a great movie, by the way. We don't want to build a culture, right, for our kids. And if you have trauma from your own childhood, or you have a very harsh, punitive superego, that's that internalized parent voice. And to come back to Freud said our ego, that's our sense of self, not ego as in narcissism. Ego has to mediate and make sense of and balance that internalized parent voice, i.e. superego, against our id, which is like impulse, wants, kind of things that we just, impulsively think about or maybe want. And so our ego has to be strong to make sense of both of those. So think about it. If you're raising a child that doesn't have a strong ego or sense of self or core, and they can't balance against their impulses, and again, social media, right, will tell all of us that we need to buy a bazillion products right now. It doesn't matter what we have in the bank. And we all need to be driving, I don't know, the latest and greatest car. And we all need the latest and greatest, skincare solutions. And we need whatever, the latest and greatest, right, workout gear and workout this and that. it's going to be hard for that child if you're imprinting upon them day after day, night after night, that they're not good enough and being so harsh, right? And beginning to plant seeds that are germinating into their own inner critic. I had a client not too long ago, I'll never forget, who was a man and was an adult. And I asked him, name your inner critic. And without missing a beat, he said, Wanda the Worrier, which is amazing because he was a man and he had a bit of a Italiano accent. And he was from Jersey. And I could say that because I'm from Long Island. And so it was awesome. And we talked a lot about who that was. And it was, not necessarily even a real person named Wanda, but it was just this inner critic that was always worried about every little thing and, constantly like wringing of the hands and tight. And it had a real shunting effect on his career because he was brilliant and had a million ideas, but just couldn't liberate himself from Wanda, of course, until we started working together and we took her down, right? And we realized that maybe she had some positive qualities to her. Maybe she was looking out for him to not get hurt. And maybe that was a bit of a loving, smothering mom. And that's who it certainly was. That's where it was kind of birthed from. I had another girl I worked with not too long ago who I said, who's your inner critic? Because you got a healthy, beefy inner critic for sure, who's running roughshod all over your life. I think she was 16 off the top. And she said, I don't know, give me a minute. And then she came up with Miss Perfectiva. How cool is that, right? So Miss Perfectiva. And then I had her draw her, and she was perfect looking. I mean, she looked like the most perfect kind of like supermodel-ish looking person with the perfect bangs and the perfect this and the perfect body and the perfect, right? So that's tough. And she was beating herself up every day against Miss Perfectiva. And Miss Perfectiva was kicking her butt. The score was probably 2,000 to 1. And so again, it's okay if you have an inner critic as a parent, but we got to name it and we got to do our own inner work, right? So that inner critic isn't now creating a drip down cultural effect that's asking our kids to be equally as hard on themselves, right? Because that's no fun. And you don't even like your inner critic, let's be real. You don't even want it, right? Sometimes we drink Kool-Aid and we're kind of like robotically going through the motions of following someone else's program or plan. And we didn't even know how we got sold on we're supposed to have this type of house or this type of car or this type of life. And we're just like lambs to the slaughter for that. So if you have an inner critic, spend some time this weekend, name them. You can draw them. It's really fun to see what you come up with. It could be, oh my God, a demon, a monster, some ghoulish thing. Or it could be literally look exactly like a person from a movie or a character from a book, or it could look like a character from a show. My inner critic looks exactly like Buddy Holly and Archie from Happy Days. And so my inner critic looks kind of like a 1950s like milk delivery guy in a way. He's got like suspenders on and he's got a bow tie. I know this because I drew him. And he's definitely got a fanny pack on and he's got khaki pants. And I think he has boat shoes. I forget. But he's got the really thick Buddy Holly glasses. And that guy forever got in my way as a therapist, as a person, as an entrepreneur. And thank God, because I made peace with my inner critic and actually have created a role. I've become now the CEO where I've given them a role. They're my comptroller. They're my risk analyst. And I need them every now and again because I am an entrepreneur and I am more on the ADHD side at times. So I need them. But they're sitting maybe in the back seat, right? I don't need to have them tied up and riding in the trunk, but they're definitely not riding shotgun and they're definitely not driving anymore. For years and years and years, I let them prevent me from basically becoming who I needed to become. And now I'm so okay with dropping a few balls every day because I know most of them are rubber and I'm clear as to which balls are glass, which is obviously my health, my children's health, the wellness of my family, the wellness of my marriage, but I'm okay with dropping a bunch of balls. So, entrepreneurs and ADHD folk like myself, we're juggling a lot of balls, and we may drop a bunch, but we get a lot done, more so than the person who's only, holding two or three and wants to be perfect around those two or three and never drop them. So my inner critic really got in my way earlier on in my life, in my early 20s, and was striving toward perfection. And I wasn't happy, and I wasn't the best version of Tom Miller. And now I thankfully can model that for my kids and model that for my clients and my parents. Like, let's get messy, right? Let's get in the arena. Let's make mistakes. Let's try stuff. Let's try zany creative things, which I'm going to transition to in a second. But again, you got to start with you, right? We are the leaders of our household. We create the culture, and we have to be kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, that movie. We have to be guardians of our culture. And so just really kind of audit real quick, like, how do you handle mistakes, right? What sounds do you make? What noises do you make? How do you talk out loud? How do you talk to yourself, by the way? Because your kids are hearing that too. So start modeling some kindness, some grace, right? Start picking yourself up. Also, how much is like, to what degree is your culture positive versus, again, solely outcome, performance, or perfection based, right? Are we so fixated on, their kids must get a 96 or 97 or whatever that is, and if they don't, it's all for naught, right? So take a good hard look first and foremost at the culture you're building, because you may be consciously or unconsciously, right, scattering some seeds, some inner critic seeds that are going to really start growing like a weed in your family, and your kiddos most likely will internalize that into their own, again, super ego or their own internal voice. And unfortunately, that will be with them until they may or may not, right? Like I'm asking you to do, take a hard look at that and begin to work through their own inner critic. And so we have an opportunity to create generational trauma here, or generational, let's say, anxiety, generational judgment, generational criticism that then will flow to your grandkids. Or we have a chance to build a positive fail-forward culture that extends grace and allows your kids, right, to be kinder to themselves and not be so harsh and not have inner critics. And please, for no seconds, think that I'm not a parent that holds a ridiculously high standard. You can hold a high standard and create a fun, positive, fail-forward culture to get there. I'm definitely not raising kids that aren't going to hit the ground running and enter fully into adulting. So there's a way to do both. There's a way to do both. You can have grace with yourself as you become, right? Because we all are becoming, and not be so, again, outcome focused. And you could be kinder to yourself while simultaneously holding a high standard. So I want to give you a bunch of fun, cool, creative things, okay? Before we do that, I just want you, if I didn't make it abundantly clear, some of the negative, harmful effects are really, really center around your kiddo's self-esteem, right? So the last thing we want is for a child to doubt their abilities, feel inadequate, right? And then avoid opportunities. Think about it. Do you really want your kid to not raise their hand and try that group project, or try to run for that office at school, or to try out for the play, or try out for the sports team, or to shoot their shot with a guy or a girl they like, or to shoot their shot literally and figuratively in a basketball game? I have so many clients over the years that would get tight in sports performance or academic performance or artistic or whatever performance, right? And they knew it. They knew the answer. They are good enough to score that penalty kick or whatever that is, but they got really tight. Children also that become overly concerned with making mistakes, again, it's going to prevent them from trying out for new crap, which we want them to try out for new stuff. We want them to try out for, again, that new team or that new thing, or I don't know, jump on the stage at the talent show and start beatboxing or start singing or whatever that is. And the last thing we want is for kids to see themselves as flawed or unworthy. Oof. Because once they're there, I mean, if you listen to the podcast about how do you know if your kiddo is in an unhealthy or toxic relationship, magnetically, their inner critic will pull toward them other people that will also know that, which is scary, right? Because predators, and I'm not talking about pedophiles per se, I'm just talking about people that are boundary violators, unfortunately, right, can see kiddos or people, right, that don't think so highly of themselves. And guess what? They're going to put themselves in a relationship as a doormat. All right. So there's a lot at stake. We know their confidence obviously hangs in the balance on whether or not they have an inner critic or they have really positive inner self talk. So here's a bunch of cool things that we can do. So first and foremost, let's encourage positive self-talk. Like whenever possible, catch them and ask them like, dude, say that again. Like, if you're like, I suck, right? I'm terrible. I'm never going to make this team, or, oh my God, I'm such an idiot, right? Be like, okay, right? Yes, you're struggling. Let's acknowledge it, right? Acknowledge the elephant in the room. Yes, you just bombed that test. You're right? It's hard. You're not an idiot, right? You're really smart. However, this is challenging for you, or this isn't your cup of tea. Or we know from if the kiddo has learning challenges, right? We know from your testing that you have a low working memory or a low processing speed or whatever that is, or you're dyslexic, right? So we want to constantly get our kids to focus on their positives and their strengths and to be in the gain versus the gap of where they are. All right. Really important. A really important thing is to set realistic expectations. I see a lot of kids, parents too, right? I mean, myself included, we're crazy sometimes, right? With like what we expect. I'm so bad sometimes on a weekend. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to like add an extension on our house. We're going to relax and we're going to go kayaking and paddleboarding and play pickleball. And we're also going to mow the lawn and I'm going to paint, the basement, so it's really helpful to help our kids set realistic expectations, because a lot of times if they have these like cray expectations, no wonder they feel disappointed. No wonder they feel, like they can't achieve anything. So it's really helpful to help your kids set micro goals, super small, right? So they can have micro wins. We want them to write, if they are going to write goals, help them write specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, and timely goals. That's a SMART goal, right? Super small, right? If they want to like get in better shape, they shouldn't be like, I'm going to run a mile in 5:30, right? It could be like, can I walk a mile? Sweet. Okay, cool. Can I then jog, half a mile? Great, right? Can I jog 3/4 of a mile? Can I jog a mile? Can I run half a mile, right? And then look at that time. And that might take 3 months, and praise constantly the process. I am constantly sending stories to my kids. Could be a YouTube thing, an Instagram thing, a whatever thing, whatever, written story. I'm always sharing stories of how I've chased no in my career. I was rejected by so many banks early on when I went for my first commercial loan and founded my first company in 2013. My wife and I, we purchased a building and we built super comprehensive mental health center that had a school-based mental health program, a whole clinical team under me, yoga, acupuncture, mindfulness, all kinds of amazing groups, parent groups, etc. But I was constantly rejected, constantly for about a year, because I didn't have private equity backing me. I was an unknown to these banks. So the stories go on. I've been rejected many times by women, right? So it's important to constantly share our failings and shortcomings, and how did we dust ourselves off and get back on the horse, so to speak, right? So try to create a culture where we're praising, right? Who are the heroes that you're praising in your house? Is it the like perfect, person that was born with a silver spoon in their mouth and never faced adversity? Or is the TED Talk that you're really, inspired by and sharing parts of it with your kid about the person who went bankrupt, 4 times, or the person who, got fired and then through that firing realized that they weren't put on the earth to do this? Or is it about the kid who, kept failing and failing and got up. So here's some really cool things. These are things I'm just giving you some therapeutic thing. These are things I've done my whole life with kids. Okay. I've been a licensed therapist since 2002. I love these activities, and these are great things you could do with as a parent. All right. So ask your kid to write a letter to their inner critic, and you're going to express to them how the inner critic makes them feel and what do they want to say in response, right? What's great about this activity is the inner critic isn't them. We're externalizing it. We're taking out of them, right? Wanda the Worrier was not my client. Miss Perfect Diva was not my client. She was just some weird, right, thing that came out of nowhere. And we unfortunately got, they got hooked by them, right? My guy, I actually call him OC, OSSIE. If you couldn't figure it out, it kind of sounds like OCD, which I don't have, but I definitely used to have a bit of obsessionality around perfection. So I had more, rigidity, and I was way more harsh on myself. Again, not a fun time for me or people around me. So OC, I now will sometimes check in with, because guess what? I'm not in conflict with OC anymore. And again, I see OC as my chief, insurance person, or my risk analysis, or my safety person. They keep me alive half the time, right? So I can beckon them. So now that we've externalized the inner critic, we could write a letter to them, and we could tell them to go hop off. Or we could say, hey, I know you're actually really scared. Maybe you're scared that I actually shine and do so well at gymnastics. Maybe you're scared, that I might get hurt or I might fail. I'm okay. So your kids could do a lot in that letter. They could thank the inner critic for, in a wacky way, being a part of their story for a couple of years, but now they've outgrown them and they're ready to let go of them. They could tell them to go take a walk right off a short pier, a long walk off a short pier. They could tell them to go screw off. They could tell them whatever. But it's so helpful to externalize it. Another thing I love doing with kids is to have them create a superhero that represents who they are. And that superhero is a counter, right, to the enemy being the inner critic. So it's really cool, depending upon the age of your kids and how creative they are or artistic they are. You could create this whole comic strip. I've done stories with kids where it was the inner critic versus, right, the superhero. And the superhero is the super positive version of who they are. And then they get to watch them duke it out, right? And that's so cool because it helps them visualize overcoming these negative thoughts, and they get to watch the superhero, right, develop, all kinds of cool strategies that they can incorporate. This is a super easy one. I'm actually, when I was preparing for this podcast, I was thinking about, I want to get one immediately. Positive affirmation jar. It could be a mason jar. It could be an old tissue box, depending upon the age of your kids. Right? You can design the hell out of the tissue box. They can design the hell out of the mason jar, a beautiful box that's ornate, and just write a whole bunch of positive affirmations. And guess what? When you're having like a real rainy day, you can just go over there and pick something out. And it's really cool because they could see it's in their own handwriting. It helps them remember, right, all these positive aspects of themselves in a different time and a place. Right? It's the value of journaling, right? When we journal and we look back, we're like, holy crap, right? We have so much objectivity. Another thing I love doing, which is a huge part of the 4 Peaks parenting program, is teaching kids mindfulness techniques and visualization techniques. There's a whole section in 3rd Peak of the program called Upgrading Your Toolkit, where I teach parents grounding skills that they can get grounded first, and then they can ground their children by teaching them these mindfulness skills that creates co-regulation. Side note, by the way, I'm really excited to launch a group model. I have this like really big push now for groups because I want to make sure that families that want to work with me on an individual basis, of course, that's an opportunity, as well as those that want to be a part of a group, because each one teach one. It's also at a little bit of it's a different price point. And then I even now have a whole video curriculum that I'm offering as well that I'm really excited about. So there's 3 now opportunities for families, right, to get the tips, tools, and strategies that they need to create an immediate shift. And I'm so excited that I have these 3 different family wellness offerings now. So that's great. So, and in all of them, you get to learn more about a bunch of cool mindfulness or visualization skills. Positivity wall or poster. I've done this a bazillion times where a kiddo builds a poster that has like all their amazing like traits and, positive aspects of who they are, their superpowers. I did it actually the other day. When I was doing one of the Four Peaks groups, I had families write down on sticky pads all the positive things about themselves and stick it to their chest. And then I had them in a different color write a few negative things that their inner critic says about them as a parent. And then we ripped them up and we talked about, right, why those no longer exist and what are the ways that they are now, that the hacks that they have or the skills they have that make those old negative labels no longer apply. You can do the same thing with your kid. You can have them put sticky pads on themselves that say all the positive things that they think about themselves. You could add a bunch. What are some negative things, either internally or externally, you've heard about yourself, and they're still kind of lodged in there and stuck? And then what's the cost of keeping them still on your sort of chest, right? They're written on a sticky pad. And then crumple them up and talk about the cost and how does it feel, right, to let go of that weight. That's a good one. Gratitude journaling. I really want to get back on this. Really powerful. I was doing it for a hot minute before I went to bed. 5 things I'm grateful for. You can get them as well they can write it in the morning. They can write it in the middle of the day, just to shift that perspective away from the pessimism or the negative and toward the positive. You can come up with a million other ideas. Another favorite thing I love doing is the superhero pose or power pose, I call it. There's a lot of research around this. If you stand with your shoulders back, chest out, hands on your hips, that's a real power pose. You can have your hands above you, kind of like Mighty Mouse, right? Think of Usain Bolt before he runs his race. He kind of leans down and has one hand like in a fist and one hand pointing up in the sky. It looks like Superman about to take off. There's a lot of neurobiology associated with power poses and how it induces a sense of positivity, right, and direction and focus. So I just gave you a lot there. At the end of the day, please start with yourself, right? If you have an inner critic, take it down, draw it, right? Name it, right? Begin to look at, again, maybe it served a purpose for a little while, but it doesn't anymore. Change the way you talk about yourself. Change the way you view mistakes. Extend yourself, first and foremost, grace, as well as your kids. Focus on the process, not the outcome, right? Challenge them to correct anytime they start talking negative about themselves. Help them to realize this is just a moment, right? It's not their life. And change the culture of your house away from negativity and toward praising positive innovation, failing forward, and will keep those inner critics at bay. And I gave you all those tools and hacks and tips to do. They're great. Those are great techniques that you could start. You could do one a week, but get your positivity jar going, get your gratitude journal going, and just change it so that your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren don't have to have healthy, heavy inner critics that sit on their shoulders and decrease their potential. I hope you got a lot out of this. I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Please sign up for the newsletter if you haven't already. There's a way to do that in the show notes. And please check out fourpeaksparents.com so you can learn more about these family wellness offerings. And if you ever want to just reach out, jump on a free discovery call, always open to doing that. See how I can help create shift for you and your family, as well as I'd love to hear new topics that you want to hear about on this podcast. Have an amazing day. Thanks so much and be well. Hey everyone, Thomas here. First off, it means the world to me that you took the time to listen to my podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Also, if you want to receive the latest podcast updates, as well as expert parenting tips and practical strategies for navigating your tween, teen, or young adults challenges directly to your inbox, then sign up for my newsletter. The link is in the description. And most importantly, if you're tired of feeling overwhelmed, stuck, stressed, and are losing sleep because you're constantly worried about your tween, teen, or young adult, your first step is to realize that you still have a choice and can do something about it. I'm ready to help you take action and create the results you desire today. Just go to 4peaksparents.com and book a free strategy call. Let's do this. Last thing, while you were listening to this show, who was the one person that you thought could really benefit from hearing it? Please share it with them.